Hello everyone, this is POL 51, week 3. We are doing today, we are reading from Locke, John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, chapters 1, 11. I will go back to that in a moment. Remember that the discussion board entry for this weekend and the journal entry, right, they're both due by next Monday, the 28th. And then for this week, the current week, week 3, then you have time until Monday, October 5th for both entries, okay? Usually the discussion board entry is your reaction to a video that I put on Blackboard for week 1, and I saw many people reacted with interesting remarks to Michelle Obama's speech at the Democratic Convention. Then this week, you're still doing this. I got some entries, not all of them, but the video was is Bernie Sanders' speech at the Democratic Convention. But I also sent you two more very short videos, a clip from an interview that Cornel West, an important American philosopher, right, gives speaking on about the question of democratic socialism, and then also a clip by, in which Trump, makes some remarks on the proper and improper way of teaching history, and he attacks during those remarks an important American historian, Howard Zinn, who wrote a very important and great book called A People's History of the United States. In a few weeks, probably, I will ask you to, as an option, right, read one chapter from that book as well. So, in any case, do this, write this reaction, and then also your journal entry, which for week 2 is on Hobbes. We read some chapters from Hobbes from the Leviathan, chapters 13, 16 last time, and the short text that I gave you, sent you on political ideology. And then for this current week, the journal entry will be on precisely John Locke, right? And these chapters 1 to chapter 11, but especially the initial chapters are more important. I'll say a few words in a moment, although I also send you another video, short video, but good, on Locke, that on his political theory. You can use that as well. So, in any case, again, you contact me with any questions, right? Like I said, I want to keep this short, but if you go to the text, right, and see, you have right, chapter 1, which is kind of introductory, right, in which he speaks of political power. That's interesting. I take political power. I highlighted some passages from you. This is at the end of page 3. I mean, at the end of chapter 1, the top of page 3, the left column, I take political power to be right, to be a right. What is political power? A right to make law, and so on and so forth. But then important chapters for you will be chapters 2 and 3. 2 on the state of nature, and 3 on the state of war, in which you will see that precisely that's an important thing, that Locke is completely different in this sense, different from Hobbes. Okay, for Hobbes, the state of nature is a state of war. You will remember a state of war of everyone against everyone, in which life is impossible, right? Whereas for Locke, there is an important difference, an infinite, if you will, distance between the state of nature and the state of war. So he says that really what Hobbes speaks of is not the state of nature, but the state of war. But the state of nature, contrary to what Hobbes says, is good for John Locke, right? Whereas for, I mean, in a simplistic way, we can say for Hobbes it is evil, evil in the sense, anything goes. There is not just, no unjust, no right, no wrong, and so on and so forth, right? So, but this is important. I mean, usually when, I mean, John Locke is the philosopher associated with American. History, the making of American history, the Declaration of Independence, and so on, the U.S. Constitution, the ideas that basically make up the most traditional and dominant ideology in American history, the liberal ideology. But I thought that it was important to also read Hobbes because although there is this contrast between them, but in a way that should be thought provoking, right, for you. I mean, especially today in the age of the society of control, not only in the context of the US, but globally, it seems that maybe Hobbes is important as well for us, right, to understand what we are living in and through right now. I mean, Hobbes is usually seen as what today we might say that, at the origin of the totalitarian type of government ideology and so on, authoritarian, whereas Locke would be the opposite, liberal, democratic, and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that it is important to also read Hobbes in the context of what we are doing, even, speaking in particular about American government and politics. But in any case, so this is what, you know, on in chapter 2 John Locke also speaks of sovereignty. He uses the word, and remember that he speaks about these natural rights in the way in which also Hobbes spoke about natural rights, but that's, the right to do as you please. The natural rights, they are inalienable, which is an important word also, right, in the declaration. And so they are, there to begin with. That's what he says, for example. I mean, in chapter 2 he speaks about these ideas, but then it is in chapter, for example, I just read this one moment from chapter the end of chapter 2, the very end of chapter 2, okay, and I also affirm that that's at the top of page 5, the right column, that all men are naturally right in the state of nature and remain so until they consent to make themselves members of some political society. But this is not that drastic, if you will, traumatic way in which we, that Hobbes tells us about this, change from the state of war, state of nature, which is the same as a state of war, and the state of political society. And actually, John Locke is very explicit in this sense. He says on page 8, that's section 9, the beginning of section 19, on the left column of that page. This is the plain difference between the state of nature and the state of war. You can actually look at this passage to write something on it, right? I mean, you have to react. And he even mentions Hobbes by name, right? I'm reading, he says, some men, notably Hobbes, have treated them as the same. But in fact, they are as distant from one another as a state of peace, goodwill, mutual assistance, and preservation is distant from a state of enmity, malice, violence, and mutual destruction. Okay, so there is this really infinite distance for Locke, and he says Hobbes treats them as the same. Then you have a chapter on slavery. We'll go back to the question of slavery when we read the Declaration and the Constitution, right? And then an important chapter, also chapter 5, on property. It's called property, right? Where you had this idea that what makes property, and it becomes a legal political category, is work, labor, right? So you find that especially in section 27 on page 11, right? And so this is, see what you make of it, but this is also important because this is at the beginning of modernity, right? I mean, the age of conquest, right? When which also means the beginning of the right extermination of the Native Americans and the conquest of so many areas, different areas of the world by the Europeans. But that's an important element to consider because, and we'll go back to that, but precisely the Native Americans were not protected by the law. They were beyond, not included in, but excluded from the law, right? And so this is what in the minds of and these ideologies are important in that sense, right? Of Europeans in the ideology, right? That they used the logic that meant that justified the violence and the conquest and ultimately the virtual extermination of the Native Americans, right? The idea of property that common land, no one owns it, so then you can take it away, do anything you want, and so on and so forth. But in any case, this is on page 13, the top of page 13, and I highlighted this. Locke says, when God gave the world in common to all mankind, that's an idea, right, which is in itself problematic. I leave this to you to think about, right? God gave the world in common to all mankind. He commanded man to work, and man, right? Again, consider this. Of course, it's gendered language because of the time, but it's also important from a political, philosophical point of view. And man needed to work in order to survive, and this is really the beginning of property and private property. Okay, so in any case, contact me as always with questions if you have any, and make sure that you do write your journal entry and your discussion board entry regularly. Okay, so see you next time. Thank you.